Hello, today we have Kong Do, CEO of BioVie Pharma. Kong, welcome back.
Thank you for having me back, Craig. It's great to be here.
Great to have you. BioVie is a clinical stage company focused on developing innovative therapies to treat neurological and neurodegenerative disorders, as well as advanced liver disease. Let's start with a brief overview of your pipeline.
We have two assets in our pipeline. The first is NE3107, which is being developed for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And our second asset is BIV201, which is in the clinic for ascites, which is an end-stage liver disease.
Kong, you just presented exciting data from your NE3107 program at the Alzheimer Associates International Conference in Amsterdam. What can you tell us about this data and its importance?
It was some fabulous data that we presented, but to put it into context, let me start with an analogy. We may all remember a DVD. I know streaming is taken over, but they're DVDs. We may remember that when you first buy a DVD, it's pristine, you put it into the player, the laser reads it, it gives you a beautiful picture and great sound. But as you play that DVD over and over again, it may get scratches on it, you may have fingerprint smudges, and as a result, the laser cannot easily decode the information that is on that DVD. And that's why we get skip pictures and bad sound and stuttering and so forth. Well, it turns out that our body works in a very similar way. We all know that everything in our body is encoded for by our genes and our DNA. But we also know our behavior on things like diet and exercise and our environment also affects our body, right? And the aging process itself affects the body. Well, it turns out all of that is kind of like the smudges on a DVD, and it's called epigenetics. And when it comes to epigenetics, there's something called hypermethylation of our DNA. I know it's a mouthful, but the way to kind of think about it is gunk getting added to our genes, our DNA. And as a result, the body just cannot decode that very well. I give that context because we presented data in Amsterdam that shows how NE3107 may be affecting the epigenetics in our body. Specifically, we showed that NE3107 is reducing the level of DNA methylation for specific genes that have been correlated to the improvements in cognition, in the biomarkers, and imaging endpoints that we reported on before. So we now have an epigenetic understanding of how NE3107 works and how that is leading to the improvements that we saw in our clinical trials. This is really, really exciting, right? Because with this understanding, we now have increased optimism for what we may expect to see later on this year when our phase 3 for Alzheimer's reads out.
Kong, that is extremely exciting, and I very much appreciate the accessible way in which you explained that. Let's turn now to the market potential. BioVie has projected the potential for $30 billion in annual sales for every 1 million people treated in the United States, and that's just 15% of market penetration. How does the cost of your treatment compare to others in development?
We have, in our projections, tried to price this roughly comparable to what the recently approved drugs are priced. But we believe this would provide payers a significant savings. The reason that is the case is that NE3107 in our clinical trials so far has shown itself to be very safe. Right? So there has been no difference in the adverse events for those treated with 3107 compared to those treated with placebo. So this is a significant advantage because the patients will not need to have monitoring, regular scans, imaging scans, and so forth. And 3107, in addition, is a capsule. So patients take 2 capsules a day, whereas the competitive products that have been approved are infusions. Right? So when you add in the cost of infusion, the cost of imaging, the cost of essentially regularly testing these patients, that is a significant cost adder to the healthcare system that we essentially would be avoiding.
You know, Kong, your ascites and Parkinson's programs also represent billion-dollar opportunities, in fact, multi-billion-dollar opportunities. Give us a snapshot of the commercial potential for these programs and the current estimated timeline to approval and launch.
We believe NE3107 may have the potential to be the first new therapy for Parkinson's disease in over 5 decades. The results that we provided from our phase 2 program showed the drug's intrinsic promotoric activity. And most significantly, it showed that it was able to help patients maintain what's called the morning on symptom. You and I take it for granted that when you wake up in the morning, we can just get out of bed. But unfortunately, that is just not the case for many Parkinson's patients because they are on a drug called levodopa, which is essentially the standard of care that has been around for 50 years. But levodopa, unfortunately, has what's called a short half-life. It doesn't act very long. So it wears off overnight. So when Parkinson's patients wake up in the morning, they have locked muscles. They're stiff and often cannot get out of bed. Right? So a third of the patients treated with NE3107 with levodopa in our trial were able to get out of bed in the morning. So our experts were very, very excited about this compared to like none of those that were treated with levodopa alone. So this led our experts to get us focused on what's truly the biggest unmet need right now, which is make sure that patients can get out of bed in the morning. They have motor control in the morning, right? And we believe now this could be developed as a monotherapy of just 3107 alone, and it could become first-line therapy for patients when they're diagnosed. So this is a huge potential. We believe that this could easily become a $3-5 billion drug when fully developed.
Super exciting stuff, Kong. You've got these multiple late-stage programs underway. Let's look ahead for a moment here. What are some of the catalysts that investors can expect over the next 6 to 12 months?
The big catalyst that everyone is paying attention to is the readout of our big phase 3 trial in mild to moderate Alzheimer's patients. That trial has been fully enrolled since February, and that is expected to have data readout in the late October, November timeframe of this year. So everyone is focused on that. In between now and afterwards, there's just the usual starting new trials, doing other things, but the big data readout is in the late October, early November timeframe, we hope.
Management, of course, is a key factor in the success of all companies, and especially smaller cap companies. Kong, who are some of the key players on your team?
We have a fabulous senior leadership team where literally everyone on the team has 30 years of experience developing drugs. Our head of R&D and Chief Medical Officer is Joe Palumbo, a very experienced person with the experience of running hospitals. He ran psychiatry for Johnson & Johnson Janssen. He also worked for Mitsubishi, helped essentially led development and commercialization there, early commercialization. And he was the first person to get an ALS drug approved in the United States. And our team, we have the trio of Clarence Alum, Chris Redding, and Steve White, whom we call the fathers of NE3107. They have been working on this molecule for a long time. Steve synthesized it, discovered it. Chris and Clarence have taken it through the clinical trials, gotten everything scaled up in manufacturing, so it just doesn't get more experience than this. And our head of regulatory spent 15 years at the FDA before joining a CRO, also leading regulatory activities. Right, so we believe we have a fabulous team with the potential, the knowledge, and the track record of developing drugs, and we think we can do the same thing here with 3107.
Kong, it's all such an exciting story. Let's distill it down into an essential value proposition now. Why should investors take an interest in BioVie right now?
I believe BioVie has perhaps the most exciting portfolio in biotech. We have a molecule in NA3107 that has the potential to be the first truly effective drug for Alzheimer's, because in trials so far, it's demonstrated that it could reverse the cognitive decline in Alzheimer's disease. And it can do so because it works on a completely different mechanism than any of the other drugs that have been tried. We understand this drug, we understand this mechanism, and now for us, it's just going through the motions of finishing this clinical trial to demonstrate the result later on this year. So for those who look at our science and believe in our science, now is a great time to enter and support our company and essentially be on the early side of a data readout. A positive readout in October, November should bring a big catalyst and hopefully share appreciation for our shareholders.
Kong, it is always a pleasure to hear the BioVie story and also to speak to you. Thank you for sharing BioVie's story with us today.
Thank you for having me back, Craig. It's very great to be here.